At some point, you stop feeling lonely and start feeling surrounded by people who aren't real. You look around and realize that society operates entirely on performance, not truth. Everyone you see is desperately playing a role they never consciously chose. Yet they defend this fiction as if it were their very identity. You watch them exchange predictable scripts, feign outrage over trivialities, and chase hollow ambitions just to impress people they secretly despise. For a long time, you tried to play along. You exhausted yourself maintaining a persona that fit into their comfortable little boxes. But if you have a certain level of intelligence, you eventually realize you don't struggle socially because you lack the skill. You struggle because you are terminally bored. You are experiencing the total exhaustion of the masquerade, bleeding your energy dry, just to make lesser minds feel secure. This hyper-awareness is a curse. The sharper your mind gets, the harder it becomes to ignore the glaring contradictions in every room you enter. You stop hearing the words people say and start seeing the pathetic mechanics behind them. You see the subtle manipulation, the pathetic status games, the deep-seated insecurity masquerading as loud confidence. Then comes the moment it breaks. It isn't a loud explosion. It is a quiet, profound realization that the act has become unbearable. One day, you simply stop laughing at jokes that aren't funny. You stop pretending to admire people you don't respect. You stop offering enthusiastic nods to meaningless conversations. The isolation begins right here. Not because you have been cast out or rejected by the herd, but because you willingly step off the stage. You quietly withdraw from a performance you refuse to participate in anymore. The most dangerous version of you isn't angry. It's the version that no longer needs anyone. As you step into the shadows of your own life, something dormant wakes up. The cold, calculating, and unapologetic self you used to suppress, to keep the peace, finally takes the wheel. You recognize the profound weakness in how normal people operate. They exist only as reflections in a social mirror, terrified of shattering the glass, constantly monitoring each other to confirm they exist. You shatter that mirror entirely. You stop asking, "How do they see me?" and start asking, "Why should I ever care?" This leads to a ruthless audit of every single person occupying space in your life. You look at your circle with dead-eyed clarity. Who drains your energy? Who is merely pretending to be an ally? Who secretly benefits from your silence, your compliance, and your willingness to play small? Once you identify the dead weight, the cut is absolute. You don't argue. You don't write long paragraphs explaining your feelings. You don't offer closure. You simply disappear. Calls go unanswered. Messages are ignored. Invitations are declined without a single word of apology. This is the power of total detachment. The exact moment you stop chasing societal approval, an irreversible shift happens. Because you want nothing from them, you cannot be manipulated. Because you care nothing for their opinions, you cannot be guilt-tripped. Because you do not fear their judgment, you cannot be controlled. Your sudden silence becomes absolute dominance. People notice the void you leave behind. They won't understand it, but they will feel the heavy gravity of it. You have stepped entirely outside the pathetic system of emotional bartering they depend on to survive. They think you're alone because you were rejected. The truth is, you walked away because you saw too much. Being alone is no longer a condition inflicted upon you. It is a tactical position you have claimed. You have successfully weaponized your solitude. There are no more distractions, no more exhausting compromises, No more forcing yourself to shrink to make others comfortable. Of course, society despises what it cannot domesticate. The herd will start attaching labels to you. They will call you cold. They will call you arrogant. They will call you detached. Let them. You stop resisting the villain status they assign you and start wearing it like armor. When you are willing to be the villain in a fake society, you become untouchable. Without the constant grinding noise of social interference, your reality alters. Your thinking sharpens to a razor edge. Your decision-making accelerates because you are no longer crowdsourcing your choices to idiots. Your tolerance for nonsense drops to absolute zero. You are no longer playing their game, and that terrifies them. You do not need their validation. You do not fear their exclusion. And you never waste your breath explaining your motives. What once felt like a lonely exile now feels like absolute control. Your isolation isn't a flaw. It is the ultimate evidence of your intelligence. Your detachment isn't emotional damage. It is human evolution. You didn't lose these people. You simply outgrew the need for them. You haven't missed out on a single thing. You have permanently opted out. The silence that follows your departure might feel heavy at first, but it quickly becomes the greatest high you have ever experienced. You now exist entirely as an observer. When you occasionally look back at the circus you left behind, you see the exact same actors repeating the exact same miserable scripts. You watch former peers age rapidly under the weight of their own manufactured dramas, desperately clinging to relationships that drain their bank accounts and their life force. They are trapped in a prison of their own making, terrified of the very solitude that set you free. Every time you witness their petty conflicts and desperate pleas for attention on social media, your cold detachment hardens into undeniable proof of your advantage. You see the invisible strings attached to everyone else's limbs, knowing with absolute certainty that your own have been cleanly severed. Occasionally, the herd will try to pull you back into the pen. A random message, a fake olive branch, a subtle attempt to drag you back into the mud simply because your absence makes them question their own choices. They will disguise their deep insecurity as concern for your well-being. They will ask if you are okay, automatically assuming your distance is a symptom of depression rather than a cold calculation of disgust. You don't get angry at these attempts anymore. You find them clinically amusing. You analyze their transparent manipulation tactics in real time, watching them project their profound fear of being alone onto your deliberate silence. Your refusal to engage breaks their minds. You become a black hole to their emotional demands, absorbing nothing, reflecting nothing, giving nothing. This is the ultimate application of psychological warfare. Absolute, unwavering indifference. Walking alone is the tax you pay for being awake. It is the necessary cost of operating on a frequency that shatters the fragile illusions of ordinary people. You do not need to build a new tribe, because maintaining a tribe requires compromise, and compromise is the slow death of genius. Let the masses crowd together for warmth. Let them trade their authenticity for a fleeting, pathetic sense of belonging. You have chosen the cold, sterile air of the summit. You have fully embraced the untouchable reality of the lone operator. The society you left behind is a sinking ship, and they are playing loud music on the deck, desperately pretending the water isn't rising. You're already in the lifeboat, rowing away into the dark, entirely at peace with the quiet power of your own mind. In this untouchable state, time itself undergoes a radical transformation. For the average person, a quiet afternoon is a terrifying void they must frantically fill with digital noise, forced socialization, or mindless consumption. They run from silence because it forces them to hear their own hollow thoughts. For you, an empty room is a laboratory. Without the relentless demands of the herd draining your psychological reserves, your energy begins to compound at an alarming rate. You no longer leak your ambition by explaining your moves to people who secretly hope you fail. You operate strictly in the shadows. You observe, you calculate, and you act with a terrifyingly smooth efficiency. You finally realize that what society aggressively markets as friendship was, in reality, just a heavy tax on your potential. By cutting the cord, you get to keep every single ounce of your own power. Watch what happens when the next wave of collective panic sweeps through the culture. You will see the masses flock together, desperately looking for an authority figure to tell them what to think, who to hate, and how to feel. They are entirely tethered to the emotional volatility of the crowd. But because you have systematically dismantled your dependency on their approval, their hysteria doesn't even graze you. You sit back and watch the chaos unfold, with the steady, unblinking gaze of someone who mapped out the exits years ago. You are completely insulated by your own cold logic. Their self-inflicted emergencies are not your problem. You owe them exactly nothing. You have successfully stripped away the artificial moral obligations that ordinary people use to drag the exceptional down to their level. The uncomfortable truth they will never admit is that they are entirely dependent on the illusion to survive. If they stop performing their assigned roles, they cease to exist. But your existence is rooted in the unapologetic, brutal reality of who you are, when absolutely nobody is watching. You do not require a witness to validate your intellect. You do not need an audience to make your achievements real. The greatest lie ever sold to the modern man is that constant human connection is the ultimate measure of a successful life. For the elite mind, the ultimate measure is absolute sovereignty. You walked away from the masquerade because you simply refused to suffocate behind a mask designed for the mediocre. Let them whisper that you are a cynic. Let them reassure themselves that you are somehow broken or lost. You know the exact coordinates of your own mind, and it is a territory they lack the spine to survive. You walk alone, not because you are missing a piece of yourself, but because you are finally whole. This total sovereignty doesn't just protect you. It weaponizes your intellect entirely. You begin to look at the social hierarchy not as a ladder to climb, but as a rigid cage you finally escaped. While the herd exhausts itself fighting for scraps of validation from a system designed to exploit them, you reserve your energy for absolute mastery over your own existence. Because you have systematically inoculated yourself against their emotional contagion, you now possess a predatory advantage. The masses act strictly on impulse, driven by whatever manufactured outrage or fleeting trend the culture spoon-feeds them today. You, however, operate entirely on cold, calculated logic. You see their moves long before they make them, simply because their behavior is so tragically predictable. The less you speak, the more terrified they become. Silence is a mirror that forces ordinary people to confront their own inadequacies, which is exactly why your refusal to engage feels like a personal attack to them. Let them choke on their discomfort. You have absolutely no obligation to make your mind digestible for those who lack the teeth to chew on the truth. The untouchable state is about recognizing that every single piece of societal programming, every rule about being a team player, every guilt trip about staying connected, was meticulously designed to keep you weak, dependent, and easily managed. By severing the final strings, you become a ghost in their machine. You move freely through the world, entirely unbothered by their desperate, flailing attempts to drag you back down into their shared misery. Look closely at the path you have chosen. There is no return to the masquerade, and the mere thought of trying to squeeze yourself back into those suffocating assigned costumes now turns your stomach. The bridges you intentionally burned provide the only light you need to see the way forward. You understand now that true power is never loud. It does not beg to be seen. It does not negotiate for respect. And it never asks for permission. It simply exists, silent and unyielding, far above the mindless chatter of the crowd. The absolute smartest men do not walk alone, because they were abandoned by the world. They walk alone because they recognize that staying behind is intellectual suicide. Your isolation is the highest form of self-preservation. Your detachment is the ultimate proof of your evolution. You are not missing a thing. You have simply taken the only exit that leads to absolute freedom.